Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. I wanted to talk to you guys today about dry rotting and other, that term. You've heard me use this in various videos, and you've heard other people use it. There are certain things on vintage sewing machines that wear out. And very often they don't always wear from friction so much as they degrade over time, and that's because they are made from materials that basically break down over long periods of time. And there are different things that can cause that. I've shown you guys before how to inspect things like Bobbin Tire, so you see this old one here. But I just wanted to talk to you about when you're looking at a machine and let's say you were looking at this machine, which I recently did a video on, and this is very common. You'll look at a machine, someone has it for sale, and they'll say needs work, probably needs service, and that's all they know, right? Most people, they just don't know, enough about sewing machines to speak to them. And then maybe there are probably a smaller percentage of people who are just going to try to sell it to you and let you deal with it. But I believe a lot of people who sell these old machines, they've been in stores, they got it from someone, they're trying to prevent it going into the trash, and they want it sold. They want it out of the way, gone. Well, when you're looking, and I've done videos before to show you guys how to shop for a vintage sewing machine, there are things that you want to be aware of, right? Now, I've mentioned this before. Electrical wiring can be an issue. Missing parts that might be difficult or challenging to replace could be an issue. For example, if you find a Bernina, for example, those wonderful Swiss machines. If a Bernina is missing a cord, a power cord, that can be $50 to $60 to replace if you can get one. And many of the Berninas you can, but you're going to pay. And when you're negotiating the price, you really want to kind of have a general idea of what you're going to need to spend on replacement parts. And you can certainly contrast that with something like Singer replacement cords, which are usually like 1/5 or 1/6 the price. They're much cheaper, right? So it depends on the brand. But these are just general things that I've mentioned to you guys before. When you're buying, be a shrewd shopper. But even though I've talked about the fact that you want to be aware of anything that's missing that might cost you a lot, or if the machine's having issues, maybe it's locked, this one's not, but let's say the machine's locked up, you want to try to understand, at least on a basic level, with the limited time and window you're going to have to inspect something someone's selling. They're not going to invite you in, you're not going to hang out for a couple hours most of the time. So you're having to make these decisions quickly. But I wanted to show you today things that should not bother you, things that should not stop you from buying a vintage sewing machine. Let's start over here. Over here I've got these are little sections, remnants of Treadle sewing machine belts. Okay, so here's a piece that came. I had bought a Treadle once, and I saved this because I'm going to use it for another project. It has nothing to do with sewing machines. This is a piece of very old, how old I don't know, but it's pretty old, rawhide, leather treadle belt, and it's cracked. It's got a lot of cracks here on the outside. It's physically worn. It probably has good friction, but it has begun to degrade over time, right? And what that means is if I try to drill holes, in fact, I may have done that with this one. There's little clips on treadle belts, and the clips won't hold because the leather will tear in these old belts when it gets old. Okay, and if you're in doubt, you simply replace it. Treadle belting, you don't have to buy a giant reel of it like I sometimes do. You can just buy a section enough to do your machine. You're going to be cutting and adjusting it for sizing. But my point is, it's not expensive. A little section of treadle belt may cost you $7, $8. It may cost you more to mail it than to buy it. So if you're looking at a treadle machine and either it's missing its treadle belt or the belt is in tatters, it looks like this, that should not be a deal breaker. Okay, it's not going to cost a lot. You can have someone help you install it, or you can install it yourself. It's not that tough. So again, you can see, and I'll show you guys that treadle belting sometimes has slightly different tones. It'll be dark brown or lighter brown like this one, or sometimes it's kind of a goldish color. But you can see that, you know, here's the new one in the foreground, and here's the old one. And the new one I can stretch. In fact, I pre-stretch them before I install them, and it's really strong. It's going to make a good treadle belt. But again, not a big deal. Okay, this is a broken stretch belt. Now, I've mentioned to you guys before when I talk about belts, occasionally you will buy a machine and will have one of these on it. This one was already broken, but even if this belt was in good shape, I would not keep using it. Stretch belts were created so that you could buy one stretch belt or maybe a pack of 3, and they could fit any number of sewing machines because they stretch. So, theoretically, that sounds good because you can stretch it and it will fit a lot more machines than a belt that has a set circumference. The problem with these, of course, is that they suck power. When you have something stretching, pulling, as it rolls around the pulley, you lose part of the power at the needle. You end up spending part of the precious power you have from your sewing machine motor, and it's being absorbed by the elasticity of these belts. So I don't like them. If this belt was in perfect shape, I would have taken it off. In fact, it was on this machine here. But even if it was in good shape, I wouldn't reuse it. I'm not a fan of stretch belts, and so good or bad, they're coming off. But you can see here, if I hold this up close, you can see I didn't cut this. This thing just cracked, right? And you can see let's pull it up in the light here, see if I can get it to show up. You'll see just more hairline cracks. These things are made from either rubber or a composite that includes rubber. Rubber is not inert, okay? It's not an archival material. It degrades over time. A lot of the dry rotting, and that term dry rotting is kind of a general term, but it comes from the fact that certain materials like rubber, vinyls, other synthetic materials, they get exposed to things in the air that gradually break them down, and that breakdown can be accelerated by things like oils and petroleum. So you never really want to get sewing oil or petroleum on your sewing belt. It will accelerate the degradation of it. Let's see but anyway, this belt here was the one that came on a different machine, and it was, or maybe this is the one that was on this machine. I can't remember. Maybe it was this one. The point is, this is a traditional belt. Now, the traditional belts look like what used to be called fan belts that cars had. Now, today, cars don't use this type of belt. All new cars don't. Back in the day, the vintage cars used fan belts that were actually, they were big, thicker versions of this, basically. And it's a combination of rubber. You can see on the outside here, it's all cracked. That means the rubber has started to break down. Now, what I like about these old style belts is that they were a combination of some sort of rubber compound and lots of fibers. And if you ever get one of these old fan belts from a car, you'll see there's all kinds of fibers woven in, which give it strength. And obviously they don't last forever, and you can see where the belt has come apart here, but you see the fibers that have been holding it together. These, and actually this one came off of a Singer 185J, kind of a funky green color, and it even still says Singer on it, I believe. Singer, and it's got a code number on it. And remarkably, this belt is not torn. Now, I took this off because it was shedding, right? It was starting to leave like a powdery film, and it needed to be changed because as they begin to shed, they lose their ability to have friction. But it hadn't broken yet. In fact, it's still not broken, but you don't want to use this. But if you see a belt like this, I don't know that I can find this color, but it doesn't matter. The color was purely aesthetic, and you can get new belts in this size to replace your an old belt like this, right? And if it's black, that's fine, because we need the belt to function above everything else. Here is one. Now this belt is in better shape. It's also what I call the old fan belt style. And again, it's still got some good rubbery grip to it. If I bend it here on the outside, I'm not seeing, can't really make it show any real hairline cracks. It's an older belt, and I don't know how much life it has in it. So, well, here's one. I just think I just found a little crack opening here, right there. You should be able to bend it. You don't want to flatten it and crush it. You don't want to damage the belt. But you should be able to bend it like I'm doing like this, and you should not be seeing any of these little splits or cracks. That's, if you're not sure if a belt's nearing the end of its life, that's one way to tell. Could this belt actually work if you had to and you didn't have it and you wanted to use your machine? Very possibly. But it's something you want to replace. The other belt style that you might find on a sewing machine, because remember, some of these vintage machines have been around a long time, and someone developed what is called a lugged belt, right? And lug belts are typically, they have the same V shape on one end and flat on the other, but they have these little grooves, not grooves, I guess you could call them teeth or lugs, I don't know. Anyway, some people believe they give better traction. That may or may not be the case. Now, if you get a machine and the belt looks like this one's a little darker, and I think it's just darkened with age. But notice when I bend it, there's no cracks, nothing's split, I see no, and you can also use your fingers and thumb just to feel. This one's fine. So you might see this and say, oh, it's kind of darkened, but it purely ready to go and function. So there's no reason to replace that. But if you did, it's not a big deal. So I'll show you one where you would want to replace a lugged belt. Here's one. You can see it's got the lugs. And notice that when I bend it, this one, you see the cracks forming, right? Now I've seen these, you'll see these online all day long. You can find them in many sources. See that? It's coming apart. And this one has some level of fiber in it. Exactly what the fiber is and what this, I don't know if this is some sort of synthetic rubber of some sort. I don't know what it's made from technically. But the point is, it's already degrading, and you don't want to use this. This needs to come off, right? So you'll want to replace a belt like this. Here's a new one, and this one has the lighter orange color, and that's because it's brand new. Right? It's never been used. I bought this to use. I kept different sizes and I still have this, but I'm not going to be using it on any of the machines I have currently. Okay, what do we have left? Last but not least, of course, is the Bobbin Tire. Now this one is pretty obvious. This is a beige one. It's an original Singer. It would have said Semanco on it. In fact, I don't know if we can still make out Semanco on this thing. It's in pretty rough shape. Let's see. I don't know. But in any event, don't be surprised if you see a machine that has a bobbin tire. It doesn't matter what color it is. The black ones do the same thing. They break down. In fact, if you try to wind your bobbin with a tire like this, it's probably not going to work. And if it does, it's going to send little granules of powdered rubber flying all over the place. You don't want that. You can replace these. I have not found colored bobbin tires, but you can get black rubber bobbin tires all day long on the internet. They come in a variety of sizes. The most common sizes are easily available, and the average price, US dollars 89 cents. You will pay more to ship the little thing than you will for it. It's very inexpensive. These belts, I've paid anywhere from $6, $7 on the internet, $8, $9, $10, $12. It's still very little money given the importance. So again, if you come across a machine and you really think, wow, maybe I should buy it, maybe it's a good price, or maybe they've got a high price on it, right? Just looking here and noticing that here is an old bobbin tire, and it says Semanco on it, and it's brown, and it's still soft, guys. I don't even see any cracks. Occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, you will get lucky and you will come across a bobbin tire that's old and still rubbery, still elastic, no cracks in it, still has good traction. That can happen if the machine has been encased in a case with a lid. I've noticed that for whatever reason. There are downsides to keeping a machine encased without exposing it to air. You have to let them air out because they can get a little musty. But this one is kind of an odd thing, right? Kind of a cool memento, right? The fact that Singer made rubber bobbin tires And most of them are going to be cracked and broken down. But I've seen a few, right? I've collected a few. I have a few in my collection that you can still use, and I still can't quite explain why. And I think it has to do with exposure to the atmosphere, right? Ozone and other chemicals in the atmosphere that can break down things like rubber. Now, I've mentioned to you guys before, you will also find the same issue will happen with cords. And for most machines, and I think I mentioned to you that a Bernina cord can cost you more, but if the cord needs replacing, that should not also be a deal breaker, because you can get cords for most machines. You want to check. And they're normally, if it's for most of your Japanese clones and your Singers, the cords are remarkably inexpensive. And you can even get them pre-wired into foot pedals. You don't even have to do that anymore if you don't want to. And that's so again, if that happens, this machine did not come with a cord at all. And so I'm having to set it up. I'll do a video on what I'm changing with this machine. So in the end, you should be able to buy a vintage machine. And if some of the things I've shown you guys here today, if you see something like these parts that are going to need replacing, the belt's crumbling, the power cord is not good, you're still going to have to inspect the machine for the other electricals, right? You don't want to, you really have to consider that when you're making an offer on a machine, because if the machine needs to be rewired, that's going to be a cost, either in your time and learning or having someone professional to do it, which I always recommend, that knows what they're doing with it. That's a cost. But if it's just the power cord and the plug, sometimes they're damaged because people step on them. Sometimes they just dry rot, they get tired, they get old and crumbly. Never use those. Always get yourself a replacement cord. But I think the big takeaway here, guys, is you don't have to turn down a machine because of any of these soft parts that have dry rotted over time. You don't have to do that. It's not necessary. They're inexpensive, and it's really something that if you really look at the machine and inspect them the way I mentioned in some of the other videos, it's okay if you need a new belt. It's okay if you need a new bobbin tire. Okay. Now, if you have a much less common machine, some of the European brands, you want to be extra careful. You may have to wait longer to find that belt. Some of the belts are different sizes. But for many vintage sewing machines that use motor belts, the belts are not hard to find. You have multiple sources to buy them from. You might even find it locally, depending on the size you need. And if you're in a hurry, you can always try that. But if not, just go online. You can order them. I'm going to have to come up with a new list of sources for places to order, but that'll be another future video. In case you haven't noticed, I think of future videos when I'm making one that's on a different topic. But anyway, just wanted to show this to you guys and let you know that when I saw this machine, I knew the belt was in rough shape. I knew that it was going to need a whole new power cord, and I did not bat an eye. Not in the least did it concern me that, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy it. I was more interested in, is to make sure I have movement. Nothing was locked up. Things are moving. The machine, it's just based on a cursory glance, I could see that the machine had potential. And this machine, when it is overhauled, is just like the 185Js that are green, just like the Singer 99s. They are little tractors, and they will perform for you. It's a 3/4 size machine, and you might look at it and say, oh, what a nice delicate little piece of equipment. There's nothing delicate about this. This thing has all the power of the larger machines, and they actually made it smaller because by using less steel they could charge less, and they also had to get some of the weight off. It's still a heavy beast. It's not lightweight at all, but this was what was considered portable back in sometime in the late 1950s. But there you go, guys. That's when we talk about dry rotting. I know that's such an exciting topic, but it's important to you if you're shopping for a machine, or maybe you already own one and you're having problems with the belt. And I've got a video here on the channel that shows you how to adjust the belt on many of these machines that have the rear mounted motors. And it's a pretty simple thing to do, so don't let it bother you. You can probably order it on the internet and do it yourself. Not tough, but definitely not a deal breaker. So if you see a machine that needs rescuing or you think could be a great machine, it's okay to look past tattered old motor belts, power cords, and even little bobbin tires. But if you get lucky, maybe you'll get a soft rubber bobbin tire from the past like this. I don't have the heart to wear them out. I kind of like to keep them as a kind of a just an amazing show of the quality. And I know it sounds funny, guys, but back in the day, even the rubber tires were better made. I have to say this about almost everything that I touch on these machines because it's true, at least in my own humble opinion based on my experience. But anyway, put your comments down if you have any comments or questions about when is it time to change a motor belt, for example, and how much should you pay. If you're in North America, Canadian dollars, it costs a little bit more in Canadian dollars, but even still, these belts are very inexpensive. You will probably pay more for the mail and postage than you will for the device. But don't let this scare you guys. There's a lot of great machines out there. And all of these things I've been showing you, these are serviceable items, and they were meant to be. That's why really well-designed sewing machines are not hard to change the belt on. And they're not hard to change a power cord or a tire. They were meant to. The people who designed and built these knew that these soft items wouldn't last long. But it's not a big deal. They're not costly, but they are important for the running of your machine. Thanks for watching, everyone, and stay tuned. We'll have more videos coming as we go into the fall season.